On this episode of the Scott Stedman podcast, we will be looking at The Amazing Spider-Man 2 for our Film for Thought Friday. So stay tuned and listen here on the Scott Stedman podcast.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like mice.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. It is a beautiful snowy day here in Cortland, Ohio. It is about, it's a little bit warmer than other days. It's about probably 29 degrees here. And today we're going to be looking at a Film for Thought Friday. And we're going to be looking at The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, before I begin talking about the film and talking about one of the themes that was in the film, I'm going to warn you that I am going to be giving a lot of spoilers in this podcast. So if you have not seen The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I suggest you don't listen to this podcast unless you want me to ruin the movie for you. If you don't want me to ruin the movie for you, well then you can just hit pause, watch the movie, and then listen to this podcast later. All right, well, now that I got that disclaimer out of the way, let us begin. So, if you haven't really watched The Amazing Spider-Man 1, no biggie, you can watch The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Really, it just kind of the film does a good job as far as hitting some of the main points that had happened in the first film. But in this film, it's a little bit different. We get to see two villains, actually three villains if you count one of the villains in there. But most of the time, it's just two villains that you see. And with the three villains, the main villain we see is Electro, mainly gets most of the screen time, and then we end up seeing Green Goblin. But one of the main themes I see in this film is basically the theme of hope. We see Spider-Man basically providing hope for a lot of citizens in New York. Obviously, we've seen a lot of at the earlier of the movie, we see a lot of opinions. People are in favor of Spider-Man. People see him as a vigilante, and they're not not very fond of Spider-Man. But really, the city of New York has hope because Spider-Man is watching the streets, taking out the bad guys, and making sure he's protecting people. And throughout this movie, we kind of see these little things of hope. We especially see his relationship with Gwen Stacy, where when Gwen's life is changing, when her and Peter Parker break up, and she decides she's actually going to go to school in Oxford, which is in England. You know, Peter Parker was not very fond of that because he pretty much, a lot of his hope was in Gwen. And he even mentions it a little bit where he really has hope in Gwen, where Gwen is his rock. So it's who he leans on to kind of give him some stability. Well, then we start to see, things are happening in the city, and especially his fight with Electro. He basically can't fight off Electro unless Gwen is helping him. So Gwen ends up helping him, and they fight off Electro, but then Green Goblin ends up coming in, and he ends up taking Gwen, and there's ended up having this battle between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man, while Gwen is kind of dangling, trying to escape inside a clock tower. And eventually it gets to the point where Gwen is falling at the clock tower, and Spider-Man is trying to save her, and he basically ends up hitting her with his rope, with his spider web, to try to protect her. But by then it's too late. She's hit the ground and she dies. And because of that, basically Peter and Spider-Man's hope is kind of in shambles. It's kind of in ruin. And even after that scene, and even after the funeral scene, Spider-Man's nowhere to be seen. There's this crime that's happening, and no one knows what happens to Spider-Man. Just disappeared for a considerable amount of time, and you really just see, you really just see Peter Parker go through depression because again, his hope was in Gwen, but luckily when he went back to his room, Gwen ended up putting a flash drive by his computer, which was of her valedictorian speech, which he missed because he was swinging throughout the city of New York trying to stop a crime that was happening. So he ended up missing the speech. And in her speech, she started talking about hope. And she started talking about, even if things go wrong, wouldn't it be better just to at least, have hope in something or think of something that was, or dream big, even if things go haywire. At least it was good to at least try to do something big. And I think in that moment, that's when things switched, and then Peter started to get hope. And his hope wasn't in Gwen, but his hope was basically to protect the citizens of New York City, something that was bigger than him. And I think when it comes to real life, when we think about how does movies communicate their themes into the real world, I think hope is a big thing that people really want in this world. Everybody's always hoping for something, but sometimes we put our hope in things that end up deteriorating. We could put our hope in a job, and when that job ends up failing, our hope kind of goes with it. We put our hope in marriages. But once a marriage ends up ending or a relationship ends, then that kind of causes a grief, kind of like what happened with Peter and Gwen. So we could put our hope in all these different. Maybe we put our hope in money or having nice things, and when you can no longer afford the nice things, then that starts to mess with you. So I think sometimes people need to put their hope in things that are bigger than themselves. I mean, even when we take a look about Obama's presidential election, when he was running for president, his main theme was hope, and I think that whole idea of hope ended up inspiring people to vote for him. I think that's why a lot of people voted for him, because he was promising us hope. Hope for a new America, hope for a better America. But even when we look at the lifespan of a president, that's every 4 or 8 years if they get reelected, and then they're pretty much done. So even putting our hope in someone like the president of the United States, or even the president of whatever country you're in, that's only going to last you 4 to 8 years, and then what happens to that hope? You hope that the next president will do things that kind of help promote this beautiful country that you're in, a good country that fits with your ideals and your values, but in most cases that never happens. New president means a new shift, and new things are happening, and again, new problems arise as well. So putting your hope in something that's bigger than you, something that was going to last a long time, is probably the best way to go. I think that's why religion is always such a great thing. People put their hope in a God, hope in Jesus, hope in whatever deity that you worship or you serve, because it's something that's beyond them. It's something that's always going to last. No one's going to come by, or the deity's going to be like, oh, I'm done being a deity, bye, and then you're shattered. It's something that's bigger than you, something that goes beyond the box of our minds sometimes. And even things like building a better future for the next generation, even putting your hope in a program that's going to help with a disease, or even fight against homelessness, or any other type of thing that's bigger than you. I think that's what gives people hope, knowing if I give money to Susan B. Komen, then eventually there's going to be a cure for breast cancer or even any other type of cancer. Or if I continue to uh, give money to this organization, they're going to help make sure that there's fresh water for every country in Africa. And that's going to provide hope for people in that country for years and years to come by putting a brand new well. So sometimes when we are struggling with hope, it's always good to think outside of the box, to always go beyond, to dream big, to even put your hope in something bigger than yourself. Because I believe in the end, it's always going to be the most satisfying for you. You're never going to be disappointed or hurt when you put something in things that are bigger than yourself. And I think that's the lesson we can learn from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So again, thank you for listening to this Film for Thought Friday. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, you can go ahead and subscribe. And even if you want to ask any questions or you want to continue to have the conversation about The Amazing Spider-Man 2, you can go to my website at thescottstedman.com. You could just go there and just in the comments page, just write your opinions. And I'd love to hear what you guys think. All right. Well, I hope you're having a good day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.